So after making the bone, I decided to just use the one piece part with the very prominent break. I'm replacing it there, and the wound is going to be like that. You think about this bone has forced its way up here. So first what I want to do is prep the area that I'm going to work on by removing the hair and giving it a wipe down with some surgical spirit to degrease. So the first layer I'm going to place down will be a layer of red in almost a teardrop shape. I'm just going to be using Plat-Seal. So I'll start as before just by putting my Plat-Seal A down on the palette. Now I'm not going to be using a great deal because primarily this layer is just to glue down the bone, and this puddle I'll colour red and a small amount of blue. That was way too much blue, so I'll shift it back with more red. And then to this I'll just add the same amount of Plat-Seal Part B. I'll just quickly mix and screed it down onto my arm quite liberally, covering the majority of the area that I've shaved, but not quite all. Place the bone on like so. And just with what I've got left, I'll just go around. We're not looking for any sort of detail here. This is literally just an adhesive layer. And now I'll just hold the bone in place, pushing it down until the silicone has dried. So the next section I've decided to do is the flesh to outline this wound. I'm going to be using Skin Sculpt to make the flesh as it holds its form better. I'll start with measuring out some Skin Sculpt Part A, and I'm going to need quite a bit. I'm going to colour and flock it, so I'm actually going to use some tan skin for colour and just lighten it up with a little bit of flesh tone. And to this I'm going to add deep tan flocking, fair skin flocking, red, yellow and blue. Now just give this a nice mix before I add the other silicones to the palette. Just a little colour test against my arm, and that looks good. So to this I'm going to add an equal amount of Skin Sculpt Part B and Skin Sculpt Part C. And now I'm ready to mix up this silicone and apply it around this wound, trying to ensure a good, thorough, even mix of all these elements. I'm going to start around the back. Just get this little edging tool. I want to start pulling these bits out. To give this flesh some thickness. It's very fiddly trying to do this and still keep the camera sharp. I'm trying my best. Right, now as the silicone starts to go off, I want to start to smooth it out. Now just before it goes off completely, just going to quickly dab round with a sponge. Okay, what I plan to do next is make up a batch of red Skin Sculpt and Plaxil combination, and we'll build up some definition within the wound, some sort of damage or tear line here where the bone has ripped through. I'll start by mixing up my silicones. I'm going to want about 2 pea-sized portions of Skin Sculpt Part A. Into this I'll add about half as much Plaxil Part B, and then I'll colour it with red and a scratch of blue. And mix this up. Now just want to measure out about the same amount of Skin Sculpt Part B. To that I add about a pea-sized piece Plaxil Part A and mix the two together. And then last to go on the palette, Skin Sculpt Part C. I'm just going to use 1 pea-sized portion of that. Now all we need to do is mix them up. And now start working it into the wound. Now I want to try and make sort of a cavity here so it looks like that bone is yanked up through this area here. As it's going off, I'm now switching to dragging my tool down the length of my arm to give it that kind of muscular look. And the way it keeps grabbing my tool, it'll actually create a nice texture. That does now look like a very nice damaged flesh. That's how the muscle section has come out. Okay, for this next part I'm just going to make up another layer of flesh tone to go back around the edge and cover up pieces like this, and there's a lot of red bleeding through, and try and smooth out the entire area. For that I'm just going to use Skin Sculpt, and I'll just mix that up now. I'll start down this end. I've done with shaving a better area off in my arm. Already I'm working into my hairline. I must confess, I am not happy with this at all. So here we have the wound after I've tried to put a second layer of flesh on. Now it went off very quick, so I was struggling. The colour isn't good. There's a lot of material flowing into my hair. I wouldn't use this as it is to portray an injury. It's all manner of wrong. But instead of just wasting this wound, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove it, clean up around the edges, and then whilst it's off my arm, I'm going to show you how I will go about doing some TLC, and let's see if we can bring this one back from the dead. So now I've got the piece off my arm and I'm free to work around it. I want to address all the imperfections that arose from me trying to construct this on my own arm. It's quite bad around the back here. So I'm just going to put on maybe 1 or 2 patches of Skin Sculpt and then maybe do a few housekeeping things to it. Now I've got my 3 parts on the palette, I'll just mix them together and then I'll touch up these undesirable areas. I just want to take little bits at a time. Just try and patch up those areas that are created, strange ridges or dips or dimples. All I'm really doing is using this mix as filler. Down to my last couple of pieces, so I'll just select that piece there. I want it to crest up a little bit better. And lastly, I'll just add some to what would have been the pinnacle of the compounding injury. Okay, so I think that's filled those floors a little bit better. So I'm just going to leave that to dry. What I want to do next is mix up some blood tone to make repairs to sections like this, where I've accidentally hit the muscle with the flesh tone. And it's the same there, a little bit there as well. I'm going to make it slightly darker than the red I've already used, more of a brown tone, because I want to also place it here to kind of mess up that lower portion of bone and run it into this orangey pink for the marrow. So for this, I'm just going to use Platsil. And I just have a little bit, tiny scratch to start with. This brown. Yeah, I like that. I'll just go in and touch up those areas. Finding the colour just a little bit too translucent. So I've thrown in a heavy amount of pigment, and that has done the trick. Quickly nip up these bits on this side. The rest we get to play with. Now as it starts to go off, it becomes like laying down slivers of clay, which is very nice when it comes to doing visceral things. You can get the textures that you want as you're laying the silicone in. The silicone that's already been laid down, we're going to start prodding and pulling like we did with the other layers of red. Oh, this is really going off quick now. So just make sure I've got all my floors covered. You can see that on the palette, but it really is. It feels like flesh now. These last stringy bits I'm going to jam up right up against that bone and there. Tack down that lower edge. Now I want to go in, just start prodding it. Trying to sort of create those fibrous lines that you'll have running down your arm of muscle. focusing the inside of it better. That has created a very nice varied pattern of blood tones, fibrous tones. Now I'll just let that silicone completely dry. Then I'm going to trim around and then we'll talk about reapplying it to my arm. Now those in the film industry and in the theatre tend to use isopropyl, and the isopropyl is a solvent for silicone, so they just brush over these parts and it will dissolve and create a nice blend line back into the skin. But one, I don't have isopropyl and I've never used it, and two, I like to trim these edges off and then reapply, and then just quickly run around the edge with a small amount of silicone to create a new blend line. So all I'm going to do now is trim off these very feather thin pieces here. It's nicely trimmed, it'll give me a good edge to work on, but it does mean that I now have a 1/2 mil step around the whole wound. That's easily covered up. So now I'll just prep my arm, give it a wipe down with some surgical spirit, just to decrease the area so we get a good bond. So to reattach, I'm just going to be using some Platsil 10 as a glue. Now I'm just going to colour it with a small dash of tan skin, just in case some of it comes out from underneath the mould. Apply it on close to the edge, just give it a run round with my tool. I do the edge first because the edge is really the area that you want to stick down. Now I've gone round the edge, just going to pop down some in the centre. Okay, and now I'm going to apply. Try and get it nicely lined up. We'll just take a clean tool and I'm just trying to pat down the edges. So it's time to let that dry, and then I'll go and trim around the edges. So now, to finish around the edges, I'll just make up a quick batch of skin sculpt. I'll just colour it with some tan skin. Maybe line it up just a little bit with flesh tone. And then I'll flock it, some red flocking, blue and yellow. I'm just going to add some fair skin, I'm not going to add some tan. And we'll add our other 2 parts. Now I'll quickly mix these together. And now I'll just take small pieces and apply and just smooth around the edge of this wound. And it works best for me if I apply and then push back up the wound. There we have a compound fracture of the radius, including exposed bone, torn muscular tissue, and open skin. Now, I thought I'd show how I'd go about blooding this wound. Because a lot of the bloods out there are water-based and this is silicone, you'll have a problem when it comes to putting liquids on it that they'll bead up. So what we do to counteract that is we just use a little bit of washing up liquid. I'll just rub it over this edge, down any part of the silicone that I think is going to be in contact. So I won't have the blood coming out and running down my arm here. So now I've coated the area with washing up liquid. I'm just going to liberally apply some blood. And this is homemade blood. It's been heat treated so it won't stain anything. There's a sort of added effect, just use your finger. Now we have the finished wound. And that's how I do it.